Welcome to Daddies the podcast. I'm Greg.
And I'm Eric.
And today we have a very special guest, Mr. Dave Elkins. Dave, thank you so much for coming on. We are very happy to have you here.
Thank you very much for having me. It's my pleasure.
So Dave, to get started, do you want to kind of tell our listeners a little bit about yourself? I know a lot of people, I posted yesterday that you'd be coming on, and I had a lot of people are really hype. They're really excited that you were here. But if you wanted to just say a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. Well, my name's Dave, and I am a musician. I'm a songwriter. I'm a producer. I'm a studio owner. I've had a band called May, spelled M-A-E, since I was 19. I was 20. We put out our first album called Destination Beautiful. And in fact, that album turned 20 years old last year. And so May's been playing that album from start to finish on tour throughout the fall of 2023 and into 2024. And I've sort of, at times very intensely, and for the last decade or so, pretty casually still kept that band going. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, and I've got a studio out here called Schematic Studios. And I've had different iterations of Schematic since I moved here in 2011. And a lot of those were sort of big production or small production spaces rented out of other studios. And in 2017, I finally got my own full-blown studio space. And it's always been a passion and a goal of mine to create community within the music community. And so it's an A room, a B room, a C room, and a D room here. So you have 4 different recorded projects and, in fact, a rehearsal space going on all at one time here. So sometimes you run into about 10 to almost 20 different musicians all at once. And I love that because it keeps us engaged with, different projects that are going on site, and it helps us stay connected to each other in the music scene here in town and beyond that. And it sort of allows us to stay accountable to each other and to ourselves, just to kind of be in a compound with a lot of work going on at once. And that's something that I've wanted for a long time. It also kind of helps you stay encouraged, because you've got a lot of people who are working alongside of you or around you. Can get lonely sometimes sitting in a studio like I am right now by myself.
Sure.
So to sort of be able to walk into the kitchen and see somebody else and check in and see what they're up to and invite them in here and show them I'm up to it, just kind of keeps things more communal than you'd expect. Music is a lot of community and it's a lot of isolation. So I wanted to sort of have an encouraging way to touch on both at the same time.
Yeah, I was looking through the list of bands that have that came through the studio, and there's a lot of really awesome musicians you have on there, but one that really so Rookie of the Year I saw on there, and so we're in Delaware, and when I was actually introduced to May, you guys played at a venue here called the Harmony Grange.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. That was my first concert that I ever went to there. And that was actually the first time that I heard you guys. But it was one of those things where for me, music was always very much Blink-182, Green Day. And then it was kind of my introduction into this whole other world of music, honestly. And that's kind of how I was introduced into you. But to touch back on Rookie of the Year, we actually played a show with them down south in Delaware in a field for 10 people. And like, I don't know what it is about those like really small, intimate shows where we were in. I mean, I was in like ninth grade, and it was like the coolest, thing that from my high school years. But so in terms of like how like the inspiration for May and coming together, like when did May actually start? In like the early 2000s, was that kind of when?
Yeah. So I was in a band in high school called Sky's the Limit. I graduated in the year 2000, and we made one full-length album. That was the first full-length album that I ever wrote and recorded
Okay.
with my bandmates. And once we all graduated high school and started to pursue college and just post high school life, I wanted to do more music, and we were at three-peats, and so I was singer and guitar, and then our bass player sang a lot of backup vocals, and our drummer was my drummer in I think 2 or 3 other bands that I was in prior to that one. And so I just really wanted to pursue music, and it wasn't going to work out for the three of us. And primarily our drummer wasn't going to be available. So I reached out to my friend who I made in college and through the church that I was going to at the time. His name is Jacob Marshall. And I tried to recruit him to join Sky's the Limit, but he had bigger ideas for an acronym that he was developing in school, multisensory aesthetic experience. And we were both going to Old Dominion University. I was a freshman and he was a senior, and he developed his own major through interdisciplinary studies, where he was studying aesthetic theory, like what you would think to be beautiful versus what I would think, and what our similarities are and where our differences lie. And so that was like this hodgepodge of curriculum that he was putting together. And I was just an emo kid who wanted to play music. And so when he was fascinated by how music would make you feel versus how it would make me feel, and what I thought was beautiful about it, what you would think was beautiful about that, not just visual aesthetic, but audio and etc., and how the five senses blend together and all these things. I was making friends, and he became my best friend, and he loved music, and he was inspired by how music could make us feel, and even to the point like what it would make us see. We invited people who had perfect pitch to listen to music while looking at Rorschach tests, like ink blot testing, and he would play them a score in a minor key and have them look at the visuals, and then he would wait a year and have them listen to a song, a composition in a major key while looking at the same visuals, and see how they saw things one way based on the key. And so like that was really fascinating to me. So we became fast friends, and I started writing for what became May's first album, Destiny Beautiful. And a year and a half into college, I dropped out and I moved to Los Angeles. And I didn't really put May on hold so much, but Jacob's roommate was a musician by the name of artist named Kenna, Kenna, and he was produced ultimately by the Neptunes like Pharrell Williams and Nat Hugo. And so I moved out to LA and I became his auxiliary musician. So I played bass, guitar, a little bit of keys. I sang backup for him. And so we were doing things like opening up for No Doubt and The Faint and NERD. And I would live out in Los Angeles in a hotel room, and I would rehearse and I would play with him every day. We shot music videos, and I just kind of was there under his wing as a 19 and 20-year-old kid, learning about music industry. He was signed to Flawless Records, which was a label created by Fred Durst from
okay. All right.
And so Kenna was this Ethiopian like skater, singer songwriter that was somewhere in between Radiohead and Talking Heads and Depeche Mode,
Okay.
and he was on a label with Stained and Puddle of Mud, and
Okay.
it was quite awkward, but
Sure.
it was very interesting. So I met a lot of influential people in the industry, and it gave me a lot of confidence, whether it be valid or not. I just felt like I could do whatever I pursued as I played with Kenna and watched him. You know, I met Pharrell and spent a lot of time with him and Chad. And this is like prior to Justin Timberlake's first album coming out, which was also,
Sure.
you know, in part produced by the Neptune. So I was meeting people like Justin, and I would come home from being out with Kenna, and then I would immediately go into the studio with like 3 or 4 songs that I had been writing while I was out in Los Angeles in my hotel room with my acoustic guitar when I come home from a full day working for Kenna. And so the guy who was a good friend of mine for years, who recorded that Sky's the Limit album of ours, he told me that if I ever had another project to work on, that he would give me free studio time. And so we made Destination Beautiful at his studio, and his name is Mark Paget. He ultimately became May's bass player. And
Okay.
I would produce, Mark would engineer, Jacob would sort of conceptualize what the band could possibly become. And we sort of did it while we individually, Jacob finished school, I spent time in LA, Mark would record other bands at his studio. And eventually we signed to our first label, Tooth and Nail Records, based out of Seattle. And we signed a licensing deal. So instead, you know, a band or an artist like signing their rights away to an album and the label giving them a recording budget, all these things, we gave them our finished album as, you know, some 20, 21, 22-year-old 22-year-olds in a band, primarily at least. And then we hit the road, and as we were getting ready to do that, I stopped playing with Kenna full time so I could pursue May full time. And so we kind of did things a little bit backwards, where we weren't a band that was, you know, like playing a bunch of shows and like building up some savings so we could get into the studio and record a song or two or a demo or whatever. Like, we made a full-length record right away. We did it slowly. We probably played about 10 shows, maybe 15 tops, before our first album came out. And when it did, we already had a manager and a label and an agent. And in 2003, February, our first album came out, and we spent the whole year playing over 300 shows, just staying on the road and like being a full-on band. Oh, it was very busy. Oh yeah.
When you're at that like at that level of band, do you take a bus, a van, a carpool?
Oh man, at that point, for the first year, we were strictly a band. We were a band probably making, like, if we were the opener or the second band out of 4 or whatever it was, we'd probably make like $100 to maybe $250 a show. And so we relied on our merch sales to help get us enough gas money and enough money to buy food. And then we would request a floor to sleep on. And we'd have blow-up mattresses and sleeping bags. And you'd see 8 guys between our band and our crew pile out of a 15-passenger van. And sometimes, when we could finally afford it, like, sneak into one hotel room.
Wow.
And there'd be 2 people in each bed and a couple of air mattresses on the floor. And
that's surviving right there.
Oh yeah. Yeah, very much so. It was a blast, and I was very young, and we were fully committed to the adventure of being in a band. So it wasn't, it didn't feel bad at the time, but I couldn't imagine doing anything remotely that that grueling. And then, like I said, we were playing 300 shows a year. We did that in 04 as well as 05 and maybe even 06. So by the time we were a band for at least 3 years, we had played close to 1,000 shows. So to start as a band that made an album that didn't really play shows, to be a band that just stayed on the road and played as we'd start a tour in one city, play 40-ish dates, and we'd end there. Then we'd play like a headlining show or two to get us to a whole nother tour that would be the same, like 30, 40, even 50 dates. And we'd play nonstop. We'd play like probably 25 shows every month.
Did you find it was difficult to write, or did you do any writing while you were on the road like that?
Yeah, in fact, so because we were this band that was put together because of being in the studio first, and because I was writing remotely out in Los Angeles for May's first album, writing on the road was quite easy. And we would take advantage of any sound check that we were given to turn an acoustic idea in the van or dressing room into a full band sort of expression. And then we'd, check in with each other, sitting on the floor at some house that was donated to us, or a room that was donated to us, to sleep on the floor there. And then eventually, when we could afford our own hotel rooms, we would, take an off day, and we would even set up certain instruments quietly so we could, formulate these ideas together. And as soon as we had a song, we would turn it into one of the songs in our set. And again, since our bass player, Mark, was a studio owner who engineered our stuff as well, it ended up that we could get in the studio on short little breaks and either demo out completely or full-fledged produce songs. So we were writing and demoing all the time in that first year of being band.
So this was almost 20 years ago, which, by the way, are you going to do a 20th for the Everglow? Is that
we'll see what that looks like. We've played the album from start to finish a few times, and so I feel like if we do it, it would be in partnership with another band or two that's interested in playing their albums from that era, that year, perhaps start to finish. So we're not opposed to it, but we're actually in the studio right now making a new May album.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And so that is what's getting a lot of our attention.
Sure.
And then, once we finish that up, we'll be really excited about that new music. So I think we might be able to sprinkle something in. But then again, if the right touring opportunity kind of shows itself to us, it'd be hard to say no.
That's fair. I mean, so the Everglow was kind of that was the first album that I bought, and then I kind of went back and listened to some of the older stuff. But then one of the things, especially in summertime, the guitar tones on the whole album, but the guitar tones in that song specifically, they're so good. I mean, even today, I was listening to it. I've been listening to May for the last week, and I'm just I'm gonna take it all in. And the guitar, I don't know what it is, And I'm not saying the other albums don't but there's just something about that song to me that just I was I want that tone. I want to be able to recreate that specific tone. So and I don't know, I don't even know really where I was going with that. I just really wanted to put that out like that. But when I saw you guys play live, though, to me it was all right, this is cool because I've never really heard anything like this. I mean, I at that point I heard Taking Back Sunday and Dashboard, but this was new to me. And I think the opening act was Love Drug, I think was
great.
The name of the band. Yeah. And I can't remember who else you played with. But so those little intimate shows, if you had your pick, do you like the bigger venues, or are those small intimate shows? What from an artist's standpoint, is there a difference between the two, or are you just having fun playing your music? Do you feel that there's more connection with the crowd in a smaller setting, or is it you can still hang out and meet people in a bigger setting. I know at like the Grange, we would get to meet everybody. I mean, we would get to, and that was the first time where you're like, wait, we're getting to meet musicians, and they're not just like playing a set and then just disappearing. So you know, is that, I don't know, is that something that like if you had your pick, what?
I really like it all. If you're playing in front of a large crowd, you're getting an opportunity to connect with a whole lot of people, obviously. And whether I'm able to be one of the main artists on that bill, or if I'm supporting a big artist. I mean, in '05, a few months after the Everglow came out, we got to play 6 shows opening up for the Foo Fighters and Weezer. And
Wow.
these were arenas. This is like amphitheaters and hockey arenas and basketball arenas. And, I grew up listening to Nirvana. And at one time, my favorite band in my whole life was Foo Fighters. And I know every lyric to every song on the Blue album. So to be in this moment where like my band was invited to share the stage with bands and musicians and songwriters, humans that I had looked up to, as soon as I started pursuing my own personal love of music, beyond like what my parents were playing or what I was hearing in the car while someone else drove on the radio. This was like, I'd go to the record store, I'd buy cassette tapes, and I had In Utero, and I had the Blue album, I had Nevermind, I had the first Foo Fighters album on cassette and everything. And so, you get into a moment like that, and it's so surreal when you're walking in this massive, backstage area, and you're sitting down at catering, and Dave Grohl's right there, and that's one pretty special moment. And then you can go play a venue like Harmony Grange, and you can have a conversation with somebody that you'd never have after a show like you would on the Foo Fighters Weezer tour, where you get to really intimately know someone's story, and somehow you realize your music affects their life in a way that you never intended when you wrote the song, and it like fills you up and then some. And so it's like the connection that gets to happen in a big room allows a band to grow our fan base, and look at the goals that we have as far as like, oh, we wrote these songs and we really want people to hear them. And then all of a sudden you can play one night, and you can play in front of more people than you can play over the course of 10 nights.
And so like when you're playing any show, but especially when you're playing with someone like the Foo Fighters or Weezer, and you're all just kind of like hanging out, like I know you mentioned surreal, but I feel like I would just like every night just be watching everyone play like that. That is just, it sounds like an amazing experience to be able to like, you're living it. You're living the dream that a lot of people aspire to have. And so like, and then I feel like too, though, it helps like you turn the TV, and at that time, MTV, you had your music videos, and Fuse, I think, was the other big one. And you watch these bands, these music videos, and you kind of start to idolize these. And for me, it's always weird when I meet somebody, because you forget, like, well, they're just people, like but they're also like, you like idolize them. So I feel like that would just be a really cool a cool experience. And to touch back, like when I started going to concerts and getting to meet people, like to me that was such a big part of my teenage years, and even still to this day, like I still get giddy when you when you meet people. But how would you say, like, over the years, like the music process has evolved? Do you think, compared to like 2003, 2004, like music as a whole is different now? I feel like too, like everything, like you can write a whole song and everyone can be at different parts of the country, and you can, and it sounds just as good. And there are, I feel like, a lot more things available now to like do different things. So did you see, or have you seen a shift in like the music and creative process over the years, or has it been kind of the same, like how you write a song, or have you like like, do you guys get together when you write a song, or is it like you write a riff and you send it to, hey, check this out, or check out the, these vocals, or are you all together like just sitting in a room and just banging out music?
Yeah, it just really depends. When we started our band, since we made our own album by ourselves back in '03, to release an album with just guys that are just past their teenage years, having created their own album, that was very rare. And now everybody's doing that. I mean, you've got Billie Eilish and Phineas, and they're creating like soundtrack theme songs and Grammy Award winning singles in a bedroom. And you've got artists like Vampire Weekend and Haim doing the same thing, just like doing it not necessarily in these big production studios, but just in a bedroom somewhere with headphones and a couple of mics, and you use plugins and different advantages that technology brings you to create something that's just as incredible as something that would have been recorded with just tens and tens of mics and hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of outboard studio gear and stuff like that. So I definitely was raised up in May in, like, if you will, a more old school way of doing things. And I'm sitting here in my studio now, and there's a lot of analog gear that gets used, and there's a lot of digital plug-in technology gear that gets used. We'll have debates over if the hardware version of something sounds as good as the software version, and vice versa. You usually say, like, well, does it sound as good as the plugin? But sometimes, like, well, does the piece of gear that we own sound as good as the plugin? It can get a little bit fun and yet confusing that way. So I've worked in music, obviously, since I did move to Nashville. I've stayed the course. I produce, and I songwrite, and I co-write, and I do composition work, and try to get placement and sync for film and television and stuff. And so I write all the time. I write songs, I write music, I write songs for other people, I write music for visuals. And since I dropped out of school to pursue music, this is like both obviously a day job, and it's a consistent educational practice, because you can always learn something new. You can always open up a brand new plugin and learn how to use a compressor on 100 different sources, or you can have one mic and you can put it on every single thing, from a vocal to a kick drum to an acoustic guitar to percussion, and you can find where it sits well and where it doesn't do the job versus another mic. And in town here in Nashville, you've got like studios that will offer you tuition to learn inside the studio. You've got universities that have audio engineering and production and songwriting and guitar performance degrees, etc. And so my approach has always been, well, I wrote a song and I hear it in my head what it should sound like, and so I got to teach myself how to execute my creative idea into something tangible for people to listen to. And each time I've done that, I've been proud of what I've accomplished, and I've been frustrated by what my limitations have been. And so it's just, challenged me to get better at my skill. And anytime I get to write or record or produce for someone else, there's a little bit less pressure as an artist, and then more pressure to deliver what that artist is wanting to hear. And so I always try to exceed both of our expectations, the artist and myself. And when it comes to May, sometimes I just have a voice memo and I send it to the band and show them like a melody that I just hummed while strumming the guitar. And sometimes I sit in here and I play all the instruments on something, and we end up using half of it when we end up, producing and releasing the thing. And sometimes we play as much live as we possibly can. Sometimes we overdub one instrument at a time. And it really just depends. It depends on really the personnel. Sometimes that's more influential than the process itself, because, like I do a lot of commission works and I do a lot of composition work. So I'll just like write something very quickly that's due by 4 p.m. tomorrow or by next week. And as soon as I have something that I am ready to commit to, I just go sit on the drums and I play a groove, and then I come in here and I listen to it and I try again and I move mics around, and then when it feels good and I've got it, I pick up the bass and I start playing bass, and I play acoustic guitar, and I play electric guitar, whatever it is. And then all of a sudden, sometimes like I'll have 5 people in the studio with me, and we'll do all of that in like a tenth of the time that it takes for me to do it if I'm doing it by myself. So I've been fortunate to have recorded music since I was probably 16. Was the first time I did like an EP's worth of original songs that one of my bands wrote when I was in high school, prior to that last band, Sky's the Limit. And I'm 42, so in my 40s, one of my goals is to write 500 songs. And so I'll stay creative intentionally as long as possible. And there are people all over this town here in Nashville that sometimes write 2-3 songs a day, and some of them become hits, if you will, and some of them never see the light of day. So for me, it's like I just keep writing, I'll get better at writing. If I keep recording, I'll get better at recording. And it's a passion, and it's a lot of fun, and it pays my bills too. So I'm very fortunate that I get to do kind of all of that within the same job description.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's the saying? If you do what you love, as your job, then you never work a day in your life.
I tell you what, sometimes it does feel like work. I'm not going to lie.
Well, when you were describing it, it absolutely sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah, it can be, and it can be tedious. And yet, when all of a sudden you're listening to something that you just want to keep listening to, and you can solo and just hear the acoustic guitar, or like the melody that kind of is the star of that particular moment, and just sort of like, literally get goosebumps because of it. Like, that's what keeps me young. That's one of the things that keeps me young. And that's one of the things that keeps me learning all the time. So it almost never feels like work. And when it does, it's really just because I love spending so much time working on it that I might get a little bit, I might go a little bit crazy sometimes. If I'm honest, I'll, if something's due in, 2 days, or if I've got an artist in town for 72 hours, with sleep, and we've got to record 3 songs from scratch, then I'll find myself here from like 9 a.m. till midnight, and I'll make a print of our progress, and I'll drive home and I'll listen to everything, even though I've been listening to it all day long, and I'll make notes while I'm laying in bed listening to it, and then I'll wake up and I'll know exactly what I'm going to do, and then I'll get here and I'll have new ideas. And so it's a really fun life. It's a really fun job. And I'm very grateful and very lucky and fortunate that this is like what I'm still doing at this stage of my life.
And so do you know, like, as a musician, when you're listening to the final product, like it's all done and you listen to it, like, do you know that like this song is good? Like, is it like a yes, like this is it? Or on the opposite side of that, have you ever like put a bunch of time into something and then like you listen to it and it's like, oh man, like I thought this was going to sound different. I feel like when you put out a hit, like you have to know it's good, right? Like it's like, yes, this is it. Or is it just something like you just trust the process and you just like hope that it's kind of received as the way you know, like, is that something that when a song, I always wonder that, like, as like if a musician knows that this song is good.
I think the answer to all of it is yes. I think that when you really tap into something, a lot of times those songs require the least amount of work, because if you can strip it down to just the chord progression and the vocal with its lyric and melody, you know if you've got something special or not. You know if the words that you're singing and the story that you're telling and the hooks that you're bringing are something that people are going to connect to. And I think that sometimes I can be surprised by something being better than I expected it to be. And sometimes I can be frustrated with having spent a lot of energy and time and devotion towards something and just feeling like it still missed the mark. And I don't know, is it supposed to be, 8 BPM slower? Is it supposed to be 10 BPM faster? Did I really commit to the wrong melody on the verse? Is there a stronger melody, but I've dressed everything around that vocal melody in the verse? So if I really start from scratch, I have to mute, so many things. And it's like, well, who is this serving? And I think you have to ask yourself, what is success? Like, how do you define it? Because when you say like a thing like, do you know you're quote unquote making a hit? It's like, well, I don't know. Like, what do people want? Like, sometimes melody and it'll make you move, or sometimes story and it'll make you cry. And sometimes like, I remember when Bleed American came out in '01, and then we had 9/11 happen, and they changed the title because it was a sensitive time to say something like Bleed American. They changed the title to like, I think, Distribute World, and they changed the song title to Salt, Sweat, Sugar, something like that. And yet they still had the success of The Middle from that album. And so like sometimes the climate affects if a song, or even if the title of a song is like gonna fly with people. And so you can spend a lot of energy. Like right now we're working on this album and I love where it's going, and I love frankly kind of the season in life that I'm in personally that allows me to write from my heart. And then we say to ourselves, well, maybe we should wait and release this after the presidential election this year, because people might have sensitivity towards things that are unforeseen to us. And it's like you want to be a little bit overly cautious, but you don't want to be you want to be cautious, but I guess you don't want to be overly cautious is the way I would like to say it, because you want to be sensitive, but you want to strike while the iron's hot, and you want to express when it means the most to you. Like some people wrote songs during the pandemic, and then they're like, wait, I can't tour on this record. So how do I even make this make sense to me, let alone the people that I hope would have connected to this music in a live concert experience, or, whatever it would be. So I think, how it makes you feel. I think like that whole goosebumps thing that is legitimately real, especially for me. Like there's songs that I've heard hundreds of times where sometimes if it hits me in the right way at the right time in the right place, I'll get chills. Like I just heard that verse 2 vocal melody for the very first time. And I think that's what matters most to me, is I want people to feel. And I think that's why when I was a kid, like the whole concept of emo, because like if it stood for emotional, and I think like all music, it's the opportunity to strike emotional chord. So if there was a time like where this indie rock sort of thing was coupled with the idea of expressing emotion, where you didn't necessarily have to rhyme, lines 1 and 3 and rhyme lines 2 and 4, but you told a story that was heartfelt, and you expressed with your instrument, whether you were a seasoned musician or not. Like that was fascinating to me. But then I moved to Nashville because I wanted to be around a bunch of musicians and producers and songwriters that were legitimately a whole lot better than me, so I could go back to school, if you will, and learn more and learn more. So I think like there are probably 100 different perspectives, just like in a 5-mile radius here in Nashville, about like how do you know that you've created something that is going to resonate with people? And I think like just staying humble to like how special music is probably more important than like coming up with a formula or an approach.
It's very
And
subjective.
so,
It seems.
yeah, so I think like, you know, I'll get on the road and I'll play shows with the band and I'll meet other bands that we're playing shows with, and I'll gain and glean from that. And then I'll go to like an improv jazz night and I'll be like, I can't play 1/10 as good as all these players. In fact, I don't even understand like what keyword in while we're listening and how we're gonna where they're going, and then I'll just be in all of that. And then sometimes I'll just write a melody in my acoustic guitar and a lyric that's got like 4 or 5 chords tops, and I'm like, this is the best thing I can write, you know, probably this whole month. Even I'm gonna write another song tomorrow too if I can. So it's just it's just like a mystery. It really is a mystery, and I honor that because it keeps me hungry and it keeps me again like humble to like the next opportunity to be part of a creative explosion.
Well, and I think too, like for me, I was in high school in the I guess mid 2000s, but it was always kind of frustrating because I had to like I had my little group of friends, but whenever we would try to like show other people like, hey, check this band out or whatever, they'd be like, yeah, but there's not enough shredding guitars, man. And like that is what was like like if it doesn't have super fast, you know, Dragon Force-esque guitar playing, then it's not good. And people were overlooking that, like, just because like shredding's awesome, like it's cool, but like that doesn't necessarily mean that other music have to do that as well to kind of have a story and have a message. And it was always really frustrating because it was really hard for me, especially because YouTube really wasn't popular and there was no Apple Music at the time. So it was like you had MySpace and you would have to like, I don't know if you remember, like in the MySpace days, you could like search songs and like you could have a song on your profile. So I would always like search bands' music and then I would find songs from, because I didn't have money to buy CDs, because CDs were like, it was a it was a real gamble because you may or may not like it, but you have to
Gotta buy the whole
you know,
thing.
you buy it, and at that point it was what, The Wall, and I think like FYE,
Yeah.
and The Wall I think was the big one. And you know, it was hard, like I wasn't working, so I was like, all right, mom, I need $20 so I can go get an album and I hope it's good. So then MySpace came around, and and at that point I think like LimeWire was already like, at least in my house, like you put LimeWire on the computer, you're gonna get in trouble because it's downloading all these viruses and you're breaking our stuff. But it was really difficult, I feel like, especially in my early high school years, to find new music because I just didn't have. So I was fortunate to have that, you know, the friends that I did that kind of got me into. And Eric, I don't know if it was a little bit different for you. I know you were into like a different type of music in high school.
I was into gangster rap.
Okay, that's fair.
But now I enjoy all music. So you know.
Yeah. I think just being able to appreciate appreciate music for what it is a beautiful thing. But yeah, those high school years, it was rough. And then, you know, at that point I was rocking my girl pants and, you know, had to make sure I had the straightener going, and like, so it was just a really rough time, but music really helped get me through. So I was very fortunate in that regard. So I do have to ask though, so when you, like, I'll listen to music sometimes and I'm like, man, that seems like it's probably really difficult to play live, or like I don't even know how that song can be played live. Like, so every song that you write, are you able to, like, I know there are certain bands where it's like, oh well, that's not, I know the 1975 have a few songs because they're like, well, we don't remember like what like effects we were using when we recorded it, so we just, or it's too hard on my vocals, or like I'm not doing it. So are there any songs where it's like, nope, not doing that one anymore? Or is it just like, yeah?
Yeah, I think everything's on the table for in terms of May, especially for songs that I've written for May. I might need to like reimagine the key of the song. On our first album, Destination Beautiful, there's a song called Embers Envelopes, and that song was recorded in the key of G standard. And now we tuned down our guitars a half step and we played the song in E. So it's effectively E flat. It went from E flat, or it went from G down to F sharp, down to F, down to E, down to E flat. And that's the difference between 20-year-old Dave and 42-year-old Dave. Like, could I sing it in G? No, I don't think so. And would it sound good? No. Either way, like, could. But I wonder if people sit in the crowd wondering, like, is that the original key? I think, like, people just want to hear the songs they want to hear. And so if we could do our best to keep it to the energy in a recording, I think, like, that's going to make a live audience happy. And you know, it's interesting to me how, like, there could be a song that I wrote and recorded in the studio, like, almost or 2 decades ago, and I could have maybe never played it live once, or have played it live, but it was, 15 years ago. And then it just, the muscle memory will still come to me because it was created somewhere inside. And therefore, like, there's a part of me that always will be able to easier express what that is, and where it came from. But I think, like, I over the years, since I have become a engineer and a producer, and spent a lot of time here in the studio, sometimes I use the studio as the primary instrument in the songwriting process, not thinking about what it should sound like live. And then sometimes I write a song, and I remember that when May worked on Singularity together, our goal was to play as much of the album in the studio, live performance, and, like, minimal overdubs. And if we had, like, more than two guitar parts, ideas worth, sometimes one of us would say, well, how do you take the guitar part that you have and add this idea to it and still keep it one guitar part? Because we want to try to do what bands like Pearl Jam and Soundgarden and Foo Fighters and Nirvana and these bands that we grew up listening to did. They didn't have the luxury of just, like, endless tracks of performance on Pro Tools or whatever, software they were using. They were recording directly to tape. And so, when you talk about what you grew up listening to in those eras, like, I was born in 1982. So in the early and mid 90s, Snoop Doggy Dogg was just as influential as Soundgarden. And my local radio station had the top 9 at 9. And it would be like Crash Test Dummies. And then it would be Tupac. And then it would be 9 Inch Nails. And then it would be Boys to Men. And so I grew up loving all of the music at the same time. I would have, like, my preferences, and I might listen to a little bit more Pearl Jam than I would Dr. Dre, but trust me, I listened to a lot of Dr. Dre too. And so I was just as fascinated with the drummer as I was the songwriter, as I was the singer, as I was the producer. And I used to open up my CDs and my cassettes and, like, go and read who played what, where it was recorded, who produced it, who's the songwriter on this one. And I started really learning, being inspired by that at a really young age. And so I think that was, like, setting precedent for me to be where I am today, where, like, I was fascinated by all of it, and I wanted to I don't know, I think just, like, express all of it. Like, I loved it when, like, I think Foo Fighters drums sound as catchy as Foo Fighters vocal hooks do. It's because you got the same guy thinking, I'm going to sing this and I want the drum fill, or, like, the drums, like, the snare groove, like, to be as catchy as it can be. And then, like, in, like, Boys to Men, it's like everything is going to be as hooky on the vocal as possible. And there's certain songs that just make me want to move and dance, and the groove in the pocket is just incredible. And so I love all of that, and all of it really, like, just draws me in.
So when you, like, and I know you mentioned like that muscle memory, and I always wonder like, so when you go to play a song that you haven't played in a while, does it automatically come back to you, or do you have to like noodle around a little bit to kind of remember everything, or is it just something like riding a bike where it's just in there floating around, and you just can pick up and go? Or like I'll learn a song on guitar, and then if I don't play that song for like 2 weeks straight, I will 100% forget it. And it's probably because one, like I didn't write that song,
Right.
so it's probably different for you, like, hey, I wrote this. This is my baby, and so like I will always remember this. Like, is there anything where you're like, man, like what was that riff? I can't remember it, or is it just like you know it all? It's all in there.
Some of the songs on our third album, Singularity, were like really, like I said, because we were really attempting to be a 5-piece band, and what we played live sounded almost exactly like what you heard in the studio recording. Those riffs became more complex and were more like fine-tuned arrangements, and like going back and listening to them is a requirement in order to play them. Most of the stuff is actually, it sits in like the space where I can recall it almost before I'm thinking about it. But sometimes, like when we're doing these acoustic performances during the like VIP meet and greet portion of our pre-show, I'll take my phone out and I'll like Google search May lyrics so I can make sure that and if I don't, I might just kind of draw a blank in my mind. If I think about it, I've probably lost it. If I just go into autopilot, there's a good chance that I won't mess it up. But
Is that worst nightmare right there? Forgetting?
it's funny because like at a different stage of my life, it was embarrassing to have to like recall or almost like stop and restart a song. But like you said at the beginning of our conversation, we're all just human. And I think that there's an endearing factor to someone who you came to see perform a song that you know front and back, that person might like kind of clam up for a moment and forget. And it's like, oh yeah, that person's just a person. And even though that song that person wrote and is performing is like really special to me, so, like there are things that are special to me that sometimes I just don't have it, and got to come back.
Some of I agree entirely. Some of my favorite moments in any shows are when someone like, yeah, it's not perfect. I could listen to the CD 100 times. If it's a band I really love, I share the love for the Foo Fighters. I went through about a decade where I happened to look just like Dave Grohl. I didn't know who he was. Dude in the Blockbuster, which was a long time. This was a while ago. He said, "Oh, you look like Dave Grohl." I said, "Who is that?" And I had the long hair and the beard. And he actually vacations in Delaware sometimes. So people would say, "Is that you down to?" "No, that's not you at the beach. That's Dave Grohl." No, that's not you. But like, I'll listen to a Foo Fighters album front to back, for a month. I'll kill it, and I'll be tired of it. Going to one of their shows, they change things up so much that that's what I appreciate, that because I've already heard the album. I know what that sounds like. I'm here for ideally something different. Hey, hit me with something, an acoustic version. Hit me with just some different flavor on there. I think that's the best part about going to a concert. If it feels like the band is just going through the motions, like it's just a well-oiled machine and there's no passion there,
robotic.
Yeah, it's you'll still have a good time. It's still the band that you went to go see and you'll love it, but it feels less special.
Well, we had this conversation, I think it was a couple weeks ago, where like when you see a headliner, you kind of know what to expect, but sometimes too, like those openers, they come out and it's just like, wow, like this is amazing. But I know too, like I've been to a lot of shows even where like, hey, hold up, stop, we got to start over, I broke a guitar string. Or a lot of times you get the inevitable fighting and someone in the crowd has to ruin the moment, and then all right, let's start over. And like as like the person being there listening to it, like it doesn't fade. It's like, oh yeah, right on. Let's do it again. Like I think as the people who were just there to admire the music, like I could care less. I think it's awesome when it's just raw, and I like when like guitar riffs change, like you were talking about, Eric, like how restructuring a song. It's just cool. Or I'm a big fan of like before a song starts, there's like the I guess would that be like the prelude or whatever it would be going into it. It's like, oh yeah, I know what song's coming, but like it's cool to journey to
It's
get
like a
to that
teaser.
song.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it is. And I also I'm a big fan. Like I also don't care if I like crowd interaction, but sometimes you see bands and they just play for like 2 hours straight, and then they'll say, "Hey, what's up, Philly?" or whatever, and it's like, and that's cool too. Like I'm just here for a good time. But I think now that the things when the pandemic was obviously like shows were not really a thing anymore, and now being able to go to like concerts again, I think is my favorite thing post pandemic. Like I love being able to go and experience music. And but I was on May's Instagram. So are you guys going on tour with Something Corporate? Are you
Yeah, we actually saw Brian, the drummer from Feeling Corporate, at our Austin, Texas show this past Friday night. They're reunited and playing shows, and they've been friends of ours since 2003. And we're playing, at this point, we're playing 5 shows on their tour this fall. So we'll be in Salt Lake, Denver, Phoenix, LA, San Francisco, and we'll play as many shows as they'll invite us to play. So
that's a I was talking to Eric about this. Like I love Something Corporate. I think Andrew McMahon is genius. I think he's such a just a and I, so we were going to a Muse concert at the Wells Fargo Center, and I guess I don't know if it was Andrew McMahon in the Wilderness. Like they were playing at the Xfinity Live, like the little venue right outside of the Wells Fargo Center. And then when Muse came on, I looked over and Andrew McMahon was just and once again to get back to like, hey, everyone is just a person, and he was just there rocking out to Muse, and it's like this is like awesome to see this. And at that point, it was like, man, I really hope Something Corporate they get back together at some point because, yeah, no, I saw that you were. I think I also saw Hidden in Plain View. They were on that tour as well, and that was another band where they used to come through Delaware all the time. I mean, because it was all Jersey and Virginia, so everyone would just kind of come through, and we don't unfortunately have the luxury of the Harmony Grange here anymore.
Nope.
So we have the Queen now in Wilmington, but no, I did see. So I know you're working on an album, you have that tour, so you're definitely busy, and especially doing also all of your other things. So you have a lot on your plate right now.
yeah, this is the most busy May has been. By the time this album comes out, it'll be coming out on Equal Vision Records. Which,
oh, okay,
yeah, it's a new label for us, but it's a label that's been super important to our genre and our scene for decades. And so it will actually end up being all the way since 2005 and 2006 when we were touring on the Everglow that we've had the booking agent, the manager, the record label, the new album, the PR, the tour, kind of like all be important at the same time. So when you say like, will there be a celebration of the Everglow turning next year? It's like, yeah, as a part of a much bigger thing that we're doing, and a much bigger thing than we've done in 20 years. When we made Singularity, I mean, we were signed by the vice president of A&R for Capitol Records, and they spent $800,000 for us to make an album. And before it ever came out, like 90-something% of the staff at Capitol Records was let go, and an umbrella company took over EMI, and all of a sudden we were sort of like placed on the very back burner, and we were told that the label was on a spending freeze until they figured out like who the new CEO, the new, president, et cetera, vice presidents of A&R, et cetera, were going to be. And so by the time like those decisions were made, Singularity was just not going to be a priority to the label. And then we had a 2-album deal, and we asked to get out of it, and they paid us to go away, which was a blessing from the record contract that we signed. But we took the money that they gave us, and we went back to where we started making records, and we made Morning, Afternoon, and Evening by ourselves. Like we did Destination Beautiful, and we signed a licensing deal, but like the whole structure of the music industry had changed. That was 2009, and so that's when YouTube started to be a place where you'd find music, and that's where CDs were declining in sales, and everyone had at that point an iPod, probably not an iPhone yet. At least iPhones, if they were around, they weren't holding music yet, and there were no streaming services yet. And so then May went on a long break, and we started to like very rarely pursue May. And then in 2018, we made an album here, and it was the first thing that I ever made when I moved into the studio. But I was surprised, and in April of 2019, my daughter was born. And then everybody was surprised by March, April of 2020 when the pandemic hit. So there have been a lot of reasons why May hasn't really like put all of the time and the energy, and why a label hasn't put in the energy and maybe like the means, the resources, all of it hasn't clicked. We haven't poured on a new album while opening up for a band that we should be playing in front of their bigger audience, and having the record label submit us to radio and placement opportunities and stuff. So something will happen this year and next year that will feel emergent in a way that we haven't really felt an energy kind of flow from and around our band since the mid 2000s. It's going to look different for, a few guys in their 40s versus, a scene. But like there's a reemergence of the scene that May's been a part of. Then you have, festivals like When We Were Young, and like artists that kind of are gleaning from genres from 20 years ago. You've got Taylor Swift mentioning the starting line in one of her songs, and so like it feels exciting as before, maybe, or maybe it's frankly a little bit less exciting because everything was so brand new at the time. But having the experience and staying in music like I have this whole time, I'm like, well, I have the tools and I have the ideas and I have the understanding. I just want to make a record now that, since I'm very fortunate that I get to create music on a regular basis, I'm more intentional about writing songs for May fans that May fans want to hear, instead of writing songs that I'm into and calling it May. Because I get the opportunity to try something, if I've already said that, like I was listening to gangster rap as well in the 90s, and I was listening to Weezer and these bands all at the same time, well, I can like really enjoy Radiohead more than I ever did when I was writing the Everglow. But I don't know if May fans want to hear all of the Radiohead influences that are available to me because that's one of my all-time favorite bands. Maybe they want to hear me write something that is also very much from me, but was written with the perspective, I'm writing this for May, therefore I'm writing this for fans of May. And so, when we talk about touring, we put our set list together to make May fans happy. We could play a lot of deep cuts that like have a lot of cool riffs that we want to try to prove to ourselves we can perform. But if we skip over the most popular songs to May fans, whether it be just by like opening up Spotify and seeing where those land, we have statistics to sort of like gauge who May fans are and what May fans want. And so when I'm writing and recording in 2024 for May at this point, I probably have more intention about it than I ever had, because at one time I was just happy to be in a band. Eventually I was like trying to be in a band with my mates and like write and record songs that sounded like only five instruments were being played at the same time. And then I was like, well, let me use the studio as an instrument and try to do every possible thing that I've learned and every chord progression or chord that's new to me, and put it into a progression that's new to me. And now I'm just like, well, what do May fans want? And I think that's like an honest place to be, because fortunately, since I am in May, I can still be as honest with myself. I just have to both be honest with myself and ask that question. And when I hear something, a lot of times when I'm producing and I'm like helping an artist work on a riff, or I'm like, well, let's try to get that vocal melody to kind of be a little bit more, or let's like ramp up the pre-chorus. I'll come up with an idea and they're like, that sounds like something May would do. I'm like, well, I mean, I'm right here in front of you, you know.
And then you take that note in your head and you say, okay, well, then don't do it. I'll take that one.
Yeah.
It sounds like you want to be just listening to a lot of May to prepare for, the inspiration, right?
Well, I tell you what, there's nobody on the planet that listens to less May besides who've never heard May than me. I don't listen to May at all.
Oh, wow.
So it is, if I do, it's only when it's time to recall like that riff, like we talked about earlier, and just kind of make sure that, sometimes like, wait, does it go right into the chorus? So there's like an instrumental part, or, and I'll just have to remember it. But, by and large, I listen to the music so much as I'm working on it that once I'm proud of it and I get to let it go, I tend to almost never listen to it again.
Yeah. Well, and I'll tell you what too, like as like, we're starting to get older, and we're having kids, it's cool. Like my daughter is 4 and we were listening to the Everglow on the way to daycare today. And the ocean came on and she called it the water song, but the ocean came on and she was all for it. So now I know that that's going to be playing nonstop. So we went from like Bad Omens, Just Pretend, to May, the ocean, and like that's kind of what's going to be in the car for the next 2 to 3 weeks, which ironically enough was a song that whenever I was dating someone in high school, I would send them the lyrics to that song, and that was my go-to cheesy like when I would send lyrics, like that was the song that I picked. But I watched I was watching a video of you guys playing that, and I think it was when you played the album in its entirety. Was it maybe last year or 2 years ago? And I think it was like in Virginia. I can't remember. But the riffs in that song, once again, they're just so good. I mean, I was like, it was the two of you playing the guitar, and it was like, man, it's just so good. And like, it's one of those things where just some of the best guitar work and melodies that, I mean, even to this day. So it really is. But I know like the music industry, I mean, it sounds like it's a very difficult thing. So like if you're an aspiring musician, like what would you, knowing what you know now and with all your experience, like what would you tell that person who like, this is what I want to do for a living? What would you tell them?
Ooh, wow. Well, I think like we've kind of touched on quite a bit now through this conversation. The industry, because of technology, has changed so much. Something that I would have suggested to an artist up and coming 20 years ago would make almost no sense today. When May was playing 300 shows a year, we were a band's band. So we were fortunate that a lot of bands who were more popular than ours wanted to take us out on tour. And our goal was to make those fans our fans. And so our live show was the most important thing we could do, and staying on the road to communicate about our band through the live show was the most important thing we could do. I used to discover bands by watching MTV, and the programming on MTV doesn't include music at all. At least not music videos, you know? And so there was a time where I would learn about a new artist, a new song, a new album by turning on the television or turning on the radio. And so what today, it's like you can find managers who tell artists like, well, just stay on TikTok, just blow up TikTok and show up on Instagram. And, you know, it's really important that you're there every day because people just swipe constantly. And if they don't see you, then they forget you're there. And that can be really discouraging because, like, if art matters, then just like spitting out content is not necessarily how art ends up mattering. You're saying frequency matters. And I'm not going to be so old school that I don't honor the fact that frequency does matter. But how frequent can you come up with quality content? And it's okay to use the word content. I imagine someone like Kurt Cobain would have hated the word content. And that's okay, but his drummer is like the most important like human of the last 30 years when it comes to rock and roll, and all Dave Grohl does is produce as quality content as he can with as much frequency as possible. So if it's Foo Fighters or drumming in Queens of the Stone Age or Probot or Them Crooked Vultures, or if it's a documentary or another documentary, he'll do it all. He'll play with Paul McCartney. He'll, I think like if you love music so much, then prove it to yourself by being as much of a student as you want to be a participant, and play all the time and learn from people who you admire, and go check out a performance of something that you hear has hype to it, but you don't understand why. Watch a show, and if you can get close enough, look at gear they're using when you're in the studio. You know, if you can, try to let your brain up a little bit and learn what kind of gear is being used. Teach yourself as much as you can, so that way, whether you have big budgets or no budgets, you can continue to record and create and express on your terms. And then I think diversify. You know, I was a drummer in my first band, a bass player in my second band. I wrote and sang a little bit of lead vocals in my third band, and then I was lead vocalist in my fourth band, and my fifth band was May. And I played with Ken, like I said earlier, and he asked me to play keys, and I was not a keys player, so I would just take like bright green electrical tape and put it on the keys I was allowed to play. So at the very least, if I ever hit a wrong note, it wasn't out of key. It wouldn't be, a cringeworthy experience. And so I think like if you really love it and you really want it, then prove to yourself. And don't, I mean, you got to be like, you have to have passion and conviction when you're really trying to sell somebody. I don't mean like sell like in a consumer way, but just like convince people that like you deserve to be where you are. And so like passion is really always going to stick out. And then like owning your skill is going to stand out. And if you can diversify, if you can, you know, a lot of keys players can also be bass players because they're using both hands and both fingers in a particular way. And then a lot of those keys and bass players are also pretty good drummers, I've found, in a lot of cases. So if you're singing and playing guitar and playing bass and playing keys and writing melodies and writing lyrics and writing riffs and stuff, then you really are tuned in to like your creativity with music. And if you just play one thing, if you're just a singer and that's it, then like sing every day, If you're just a lyricist, but you love writing poetry, then write every day. And no one ever regrets practicing their instrument, unless they're like neglecting their kid or something,
Sure. Right. That's fair. Yeah. Right.
But I think, but like, so I'm a dad, and I've got a 5-year-old, and I was doing like these lives on Facebook, and I started doing them during the pandemic, and I kept doing them for a while afterwards. And I was practicing my set, and my daughter was probably like 2 at the time. And then one of the most amazing things I've ever experienced in my entire life, she was young. She was like in a diaper maybe. And I was singing and playing guitar, and all of a sudden she like walked up to me, and she had like massive tears in her eyes. And she just sat in my lap, and she was moved by the music. She wasn't hurt. Aww. She didn't have like some scary moment. She didn't see like a weird cartoon on TV. She just like was moved by the fact that her dad was singing and playing guitar in her safe space. And if you can get somebody to do an adult version or a young person's version of that kind of response, then you definitely should keep trying to do what you're doing, because somebody's being moved by you.
That's
really good.
That's really good advice.
Yeah. No, I mean that really is, especially too, because that's something like, well, one, you'll remember your whole life, the rest of your life, you'll always remember that. But it's just like, I don't know, one of those things where like, now when you go on TikTok and you go on, I think it mainly is TikTok, and you'll get a band that will be like, hey, I'm trying to get to 10,000 likes or whatever. I'm going to post a video every day of this, I'm going to post this video every day for 365 days, whatever. And some of the bands really are like, wow, this band's actually really, really good. But I just feel like even when I was younger, it was always like, it was hard because, one, it was always like, you're gonna go to college, and like that's, and my parents were always like looking out for me, but it was always hard too, because like, one, I feel like Delaware was kind of tough, like where we were located, but then like I personally just made the mistake of just like putting it on the back burner, and like I feel like you're right, like you just have to do it every day, and you just really have to work at it, and like if you want it, you have to go and get it, like it's not going to just be handed to you.
I really like what you said about the passion. I think if you are passionate and you stay at it, I think it shows. I think the people that you are aiming to get that out to, they can tell, and that's who you. I think if you define, you said earlier, like a hit. If it's a hit, if you've achieved what you aimed to achieve. It's like you said it. You want to make music for May fans. So if if they enjoy your music, hey, that's a success right there.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's all relative to the individual. Like as we're trying to grow, Eric and I were having this. So Eric and I have a full-time job, and like but we were talking about it at work today, and we were like, our growth, we want to double our listeners. Like that is relative to us and what we're trying to do. And like that to us feels like that would be a huge accomplishment. And I feel like it's all just relative to the individual, and what they're trying to accomplish. Like everyone has different goals, and you just have to make sure you keep pursuing that passion if you're truly passionate about it. And then if you decide you don't like it, like that's cool too. Not everything's for everyone. Mm-hmm. But I think just like getting out there and just really working at it, and it's important. Well, I don't know.
People don't maybe necessarily know, and then unless they're like sort of historians, that a band like the Beatles, they went over to Germany, and they played these like 6-hour sets every night in front of a bunch of drunk people, and they got tight, and they got tighter, and they got tighter, and they got tighter. And they learned other people's songs, and they learned how to write their own, and they kept writing, and they kept writing, and they kept writing, and they kept writing. The Beatles, once like Beatlemania hit, it seemed like it was like all of a sudden, and to everyone in the public view, it was, but to the Beatles, they had been putting in their time, and they had built their hours of getting good at singing together and performing together, and their instruments, and And like that was so groundbreaking because there wasn't a band like that before. There wasn't a movement like that. And so I think a lot of times people just think like, especially this day and age with technology, all I gotta do is just like show up with one viral video and then you've got the attention of everybody. And it's like, well, yeah, but I can find 10,000 viral videos right now. And so which ones are funny, which ones are interesting, which ones are artistic, which ones are informative, which ones show passion. And if you find something that kind of like collects all of that, music or not, you're probably going to go follow that profile. And if they're delivering more of what is intriguing to you, then you're going to show up. And if they have a product for sale, you might click on the website and see how much it costs and see if you want to buy it. And so it's all kind of changed, but like I think like relatively it's still the same thing. If you're passionate and you're good and you really try to get better at what you do, then chances are someone's going to.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah.
I agree. Well, Dave, I appreciate it. I looked down at the time. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know it's 7:15 where you are, right?
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah.
But we definitely appreciate you taking the time. I mean, it means a lot to us.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm super appreciative that you responded when you were like the first person I reached out to. And it just means a lot that you took the time out of your day. I mean, you didn't have to. So we definitely appreciate it. Especially, growing up with May and your music. So it means a lot to me. I'm Greg.
And I'm Eric.
And we are the Daddies. Thank you for listening.